Good afternoon, everyone. It's been about 2 weeks since my last episode, and since then, a lot has happened in New York sports. Got a lot to go through and unpack today. The Jets had another heartbreaking loss yesterday. Um, the Giants had some big news come out this morning surrounding their quarterback situation. The Knicks have had one heck of a start. It's definitely been a series of up and downs for them, especially with their new additions. The Yankees definitely have a lot of buzz around them, mostly regarding Juan Soto and what they're going to do in free agency to combat their disappointing end to the season. And the Mets also have some very interesting news surrounding Juan Soto. Some potential contract offers were leaked. But I'm gonna start off today talking about the Jets. The Jets are finding new ways to lose yet again. They had the lead 27-21, and they landed up blowing that lead and losing 28-27 against the Indianapolis Colts yesterday. The Jets fans are really sick and tired of the same thing year in and year out, where they're told that this year is going to be different and they're going to compete. And it's kind of been the same thing every year for for over a decade now since they've made the playoffs. And it's just so disappointing to see these fans have to go through this because they are really a group of the most loyal fans. All the Jets fans I know they're so excited once the season rolls around, but their season's done come November. Um, Yesterday was just really it was just kinda getting kicked while you're down. They Like, that was a game where obviously I don't think the Jets really had a chance of making the playoffs even if they won that game, but definitely now they don't have a chance at all. I mean, they have only one more win than the Giants, and everyone's talking about just the future for the Giants. It should be a similar situation for the Jets here. We have to start talking about what the future has in store. And when I talk to Jets fans around work, school, whatever it may be, it's the same thing. They're just like, I think they keep saying they're in a worse situation than the Giants. They might not be a worse team on paper or on the field, but the situation they have regarding the future and where they go from here is troubling because they obviously went out and they got Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago, and it was always 2 years, and then we'll see what happens. Everyone thought they would at least be competing, at least be in a playoff spot, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers, a guy that's so coveted and was one of the league's best quarterbacks for almost 2 decades. I mean, they definitely expected a lot higher from him, especially with what ownership was telling them that this team is different, that they now have Aaron Rodgers, and their whole issue, honestly, since they've won a Super Bowl, is they've never had the right guy at quarterback, and they thought that this year with Aaron Rodgers would be the difference maker, that they finally do have that quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. But yesterday was really where I looked at Aaron Rodgers and I saw with 40 seconds left on the clock, they were down 28-27. And that was a time where Aaron Rodgers could have proven that he's still that guy, that he still had it in him. There have been multiple games in years past where we've seen Aaron Rodgers drive down the field with only a few seconds to a minute left on the clock. And he really had the chance to prove himself there. But first play of the drive, of that last drive there, he fumbles the ball. He wasn't really able to throw the ball all game. He didn't even have 200 yards. He hasn't really been able to throw the ball all season. I think Daniel Jones actually has more passing yards, and Daniel Jones is now being sat for Tommy DeVito. And obviously, that's something I'm going to touch on later. But when Aaron Rodgers is supposed to be this elite level quarterback, no one talked about Daniel Jones in that same mindset. And but for some reason, the expectations are still the same for the Jets, and they have been, and it's unfair to Jets fans to put them with expectations just because they have Aaron Rodgers and just because they had traded for Devontae Adams, trying to switch things up. Not really switch things up to me because you're acquiring someone that Aaron Rodgers is used to, and you're just trying to acquire older players and hope that they could rekindle some magic they had in their youth. And it's just foolish for the Jets to even think this would work. The Jets really they have a lot of building to do after this year. They're losing Aaron Rodgers. They're obviously going to need a new quarterback, and they have to go back to the drawing board here. I think if you're the Jets, you kind of have to think maybe we should tank the rest of the season because they need to be in a good situation. They need to be in a better situation than they are now because they're gonna need to get a young quarterback that they think could guide this team for the foreseeable future, and they don't currently have that on their team. They have Aaron Rodgers, who they have through the end of the year, and that's it. I really don't see a world where Aaron Rodgers comes back because this Aaron Rodgers era started and ended for me and for a lot of people when he walked out of the tunnel with that American flag. It started and ended there. It's funny enough because that's probably the most memorable moment for the Jets is when he walked out with the American flag, and that's it. Since then, he hasn't really had a memorable moment with the Jets. Obviously, he got hurt that game and was out the whole season, but this season he hasn't shown anything. He hasn't even had a memorable. So that this whole Aaron Rodgers era has been a complete and utter disaster for the Jets. It's going to be very interesting for me to see where they go from here because they definitely are constrained. They lost some picks when they traded for Aaron Rodgers, and they lost some picks when they traded for Devontae Adams. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how they're able to build a young nucleus around the guys they currently have, like Brees Hall, Sauce Gardner, and Garrett Wilson. The Giants this week had a bye, but the most interesting news coming out of this week for the Giants is this morning Brian Daboll announced not only will Daniel Jones be on the bench, Daniel Jones will be the QB3 behind both Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito is going to get the ball next Sunday for the Giants, and it's like I wanted to see change, but you paid Drew Lock $5 million, and to not even put him as the starting quarterback is a little disappointing to me. Definitely wanted to see what he might have this year. He's also a guy where obviously he's only signed through this season and he needs to prove something. So why not give him the ball, see what he can do? We saw what Tommy DeVito could do last year. He's not really much more than a high school level quarterback. He had some memorable moments, obviously. He had 2 wins, and then that was basically it. He got obliterated by the Eagles and got obliterated by the Cowboys, and then they sat him down for Tyrod Taylor. I mean, this thing where they're going to someone they already know what they have in Tommy DeVito. He's not gonna be the bridge next year to Arch Manning. To think that Tommy DeVito could be the answer even for 1 season. You're basically sticking someone as a Daniel Jones level quarterback and throwing away next season too, hoping that you can get Arch Manning in 2026. Like, there's no guarantee you're gonna get Arch Manning. You have to think this draft. You have to think the current mindset. Obviously, they could go out and get Travis Hunter from Colorado. He's obviously in the Heisman, conversation. To pair him up with Malik Neighbors would be incredible, but it's it's not I it's just foolish to think that Tommy DeVito can even be a short-term answer. You know what you have in him. He's not much more than a replacement level quarterback, if that. I don't even think he's a starting level quarterback. There's no reason for the Giants to be starting Tommy DeVito this week, in my opinion. They should have went out and started Drew Lock this week. I feel like that would have been a much better thing for the fans. At least we could see what we had in Drew Lock, but it also would be disappointing if we saw Drew Lock go out there and play super well because then we would think, man, maybe we would have had a chance in the to make the playoffs if Drew Lock were the starting quarterback all year. I, I said I want change, but to me, when you look at Tommy DeVito, he's not changed. He's just going back to what happened last year, and last year was obviously a major disappointment for the Giants. And we can't just keep running out the same players. We already know what we have. We need to see other players that we don't know what we have from them, like a Drew Lock. It's just very disappointing to me to see that they're starting Tommy DeVito this week. Obviously, I hope the best for him. I hope he can play well. I hope he could bring the Giants to maybe a win, 2 wins. But the Giants' whole point of the season now is to tank and get the best draft spot that you could possibly get, and hopefully get a quarterback this draft, or you could get Travis Hunter this draft. It's really disappointing for me to see the Giants go with Tommy DeVito. But on the brighter side of things, they do have the leading rookie rusher in Tyrone Tracy, and they do have the leading rookie receiver in Malik Neighbors. Obviously, we're the Giants right now are trying to build for the future, and to see that you have a great running back and a great wide receiver on your team, it kind of crosses two really big positions off the board, and you could kind of just focus on quarterback, or you could focus on someone to pair with Malik Neighbors and have a dual threat, almost like how the Eagles have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Moving on to the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks have had a roller coaster start this season. To me, I think you could point their biggest problems towards their defensive mindset going out the window, and their defensive identity is what got them to the Eastern to where they got to with all the injuries they had, and how they were able to even get as far as they did without big names such as Julius Randle and OG Anunoby. They played very tough basketball. They played that defensive-minded basketball, but this year we've seen their defensive rating go from 113.4 to 116.3. That's a 3-point difference right there. That could be a game. We saw 2 games where they lost by 1 point against the Wizards and against the Bulls. That coulda went the opposite way if their defense had simply performed better. I think a lot of people are pointing their defensive woes on the newer additions to the team and the fact that their bench is a lot thinner than it was last year and a lot thinner than it has been in past years. But when you're the Knicks, your star players are performing. Carl Anthony Towns has had a huge offensive step up. He has went from 21.8 average points last year with the Timberwolves to 26.5. But people are claiming that his defensive statistics are not good enough for him to be the starting center on the team. But I really don't think that's true because his rebounds have went from 8.3 to 12.4 more rebounds than he had last year with the Timberwolves, this year with the Knicks. Karl Anthony Towns is not the problem. To even blame a little bit of the defensive problems on Cat is a abysmal take, and Knicks fans need to realize that he's not the problem. It's the fact that our bench is thin and we are missing 2 of our best defensive players. We are missing Mitchell Robinson, we are missing Precious Achiuwa, and all we have to do right now is I think we're playing good enough for the time being until we at least get Precious back. But once we get Precious and Mitch back, that's when we're going to see what the Knicks really have. We're going to see if they still have that defensive identity they had last year and they've had these past few years with Tom Thibodeau, and if they could really be a threat to not only the East but to the NBA championship. Right now, to me, I don't see that. But that's like I said, we're missing 2 of our biggest defensive pieces there. And without them, I don't think we could really judge what the Knicks are doing right now. But that being said, without their defensive identity, they really have nothing. They need to get that defensive mindset back. They need to get that gritty, tough basketball back. Because what I see is when they're down, they or even when they're up big, they kind of get a little too relaxed on the defensive standpoint, and it causes them to blow big leads. They had a big lead against the Nets 2 days ago. Thankfully, they did win because of a Jalen Brunson, um, last minute three in the few last seconds of the game, but it could easily go the other way. We saw it go the other way when they played the Bulls and they lost by 1 point, and Jalen Brunson did actually get a shot off right before the buzzer, but it rattled in and out. They can't let up. They can't be relaxed once the bench comes in. The bench needs to try harder. We need to see the bench really come through here. I haven't seen enough from Deuce McBride. Jericho Sims has still been a huge issue when he comes into the game. Obviously, Sims isn't going to be playing once Mitchell Robinson and Achua come back, but for the time being, we need to see him be at least serviceable out there off the bench. But that being said, the Knicks have rebounded a little bit. They had 2 wins in a row against their crosstown rivals, the Brooklyn Nets, one being by that small margin because of the Jalen Brunson last-minute three. But last night, they won by a bigger margin, and Jalen Brunson didn't even score 20 points last night. So that's definitely great to see. What something else I saw is Michael Bridges is kind of returning to form here. Um, he's had back-to-back 20-point games in those 2 games against his former team, the Brooklyn Nets. And I see him being a little bit more relaxed. I feel like when he first started this season, he was a little uncomfortable. I felt like he had a lot of the pressure on him, especially with those 2 guys out being Achua and Robinson. And he was trying to play a little bit too much above his level. He thought that he could be the 1B star or the next star behind Jalen Brunson, but he doesn't need to be that. He needs to play his game. He needs to I need to see what I saw the past few years with the Brooklyn Nets. His average points are down from 20 to 16, and I have seen him play better the past few games. His defense definitely is still an issue, but his defense was an issue with the Nets. We knew what we were getting in Mikal Bridges, but when Bridges is out there, we need to make sure the other players on the court are playing an adequate defense to account for the lack of defense from Mikal Bridges. Overall, definitely a series of up and downs for the Knicks to start the season, but I'm not really worried. As I said, we're going to be getting 2 of our best defensive stars back in Achua and Mitchell Robinson. It's really nothing to be worried about for the Knicks. And to start off 7-6 without those 2, I think it's good enough. And they've had a tough schedule to start the year. I think we're going to see the Knicks start to take off a little bit. I see them getting their groove back a little bit these past few games. Definitely something to watch out for. The New York Rangers, the other team that plays at the world's most famous arena, they've started out 11-4-1. Obviously a great start on paper. You look at the record and you're like, okay, they've had a pretty good start to the season. I don't know if they're on top of the Metro. I haven't quite looked at the Metro standings. To me, it's a little bit too early to look at any sort of standings because they have only played 16 games. Um, but the main problem that sticks out to me yet again is Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad against the Winnipeg Jets had 3 turnovers that led to goals. This was an issue last season, and we see it coming into the season again. I said I need to see Mika Zibanejad move down in the lineups, possibly to the second, third, maybe even the fourth line, just to see if he could get going there. But when your turnovers are leading to the margin of the game being decided, the game was 6-3. He had 3 turnovers that led to goals. The game would have been 3-3 without those. Mika Zibanejad is supposed to be one of the best players on the ice. He's on the first line for a reason. He has been on the first line, and it seems like Peter Laviolette has refused to move him. What I'm seeing here is kind of a little bit of blind loyalty, similar to what the Yankees do, and the fact that they're favoring these veteran players. Obviously, Mika Zibanejad is not at the level of a guy like DJ LeMahieu when you talk about it comparatively, but he's getting there to me. He's getting there. He's definitely getting older. We see how aging is affecting his play, and we keep seeing game in and game out. Mika Zibanejad not improving defensively. He hasn't scored many goals this season. I think he only has 4, maybe 3 this season, and it's not enough for a guy like Zibanejad who has that big of a defensive downside. It's similar to what's going on with the Knicks, if you ask me, because Mikal Bridges has been providing enough offense to me to outweigh his defensive issues. But Mika Zibanejad, on the other hand, when you talk about the Rangers, has not been providing that elite level of offense he needs to produce to outweigh his defensive skill. Another big issue for the Rangers is Keandre Miller. It seems like whenever Keandre Miller's defensive pair is on the ice, the opponent is scoring. Keandre Miller's obviously a younger hockey player. I'm pretty sure the Rangers are gonna retain him and give him an extension. But he's caused issue after issue on defensive side, and he's a defenseman. He needs to step up his defensive game. Yes, he's a great offensive defenseman, but when you're a defenseman, you need to play defense. And I mentioned it coming into the season that the Rangers need to work on their team defense because to me, that was the big issue in the playoffs last season and what ultimately led to them losing. The Rangers have just had a overall terrible defense. And in the games they've lost, we've seen it at the forefront. They lost 6-1 against the Sabres and 6-3 against the Jets. No team should be scoring 6 goals against Igor Shesterkin. Igor Shesterkin is one of the best goalies in the league. But when you don't play defense and you're putting all this pressure on him, one's going to get by, and then two's going to get by, and so on and so forth, up until the point where the game gets out of hand. If we don't see the Rangers improve defensively and maybe shake things up, I don't see them in a Stanley Cup contender as a Stanley Cup contender. I don't see them competing with the top level teams because their defense has been that big of an issue for them. You can't give up 6 goals to anyone, period. Obviously, here and there, you're gonna give up 6 goals, but the amount of times that they've given up that many goals this early in the season is worrisome to me. They are playing teams like the Sabres are definitely nowhere close to the level that the Rangers are, but they somehow found a way to embarrass them 6-1. And to me, I think you could point that a lot at the defense. The defense has been unacceptable for them, mainly being Mika Zibanejad and Keandre Miller. Defense wins championships. I think that you could have a great offense, but if your defense isn't there, I want to point to the Edmonton Oilers, who have the best offensive pair in the league in Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Everyone put them as the favorites to win the Stanley Cup last year because of that pair, but they couldn't get past the fact that their goalie wasn't great and the fact that their defense is even worse. Without a good defense, you could have the best players on the ice. You could have prime Wayne Gretzky out there. You're not winning the Stanley Cup. Your defense needs to be able to play 3 full periods. You can't play defense the first 2 periods and then the 3rd period let up, and then all of a sudden you're losing the game. This is the big issue I see with the New York Rangers, the fact that they cannot find ways to overcome those defensive liabilities. The younger players seem to be playing with the defensive mindset, and when they're out on the ice, I never see a goal get passed. That line with VC and Kako, that's the line to me that shows the best defense, and I think is the most productive line because they are the hardest working line. They are the line to me. Yeah, they're not the best skilled hockey players. They're not the flashiest hockey players. They're not going to score all the time they're on the ice. It's not like a guy like Artemi Panarin where he's on the ice and you always have to wonder, is he going to score this shift on the ice? But you never see a goal get past these guys. You never see a goal get past VC. You never see a goal get past uh, Kako. These guys are the guys where they're, to me, the hardest working guys on the ice, and I need to see that from the bigger name players as well. Not just the guys that just came up to the NHL, and they're obviously gonna try their hardest because they just came up. They wanna prove that they belong. They wanna prove that they belong on the big stage. They wanna prove that they can play under the lights at MSG. The defense, I can't state it enough, has been such a big issue for the Rangers, and if they can't find a way to overcome those defensive liabilities, they have no chance at winning the Stanley Cup. Moving on to a little bit of Juan Soto talk here. I'm going to start off with the Mets. The Mets had their meeting this weekend. So, from what's being put out there, I want to take it with a grain of salt because Scott Boras has a way of leaking certain types of information regarding his players. I think I've seen it every off season since maybe Manny Machado was a free agent. Um, he leaks information to leverage his situation and to try and get the bigger markets to overpay for a guy they don't really need to. Apparently, the Mets have offered Juan Soto a deal of $14,660,000. That would obviously put them in the lead for Juan Soto. Um, but yet again, I don't know. I don't know how much I can believe what I'm hearing around the Mets and Juan Soto because obviously the Yankees were the favorite team to land Juan Soto in the offseason. It's the team he just came from. It's the team he just made the World Series with. We saw him fit right in the Bronx, and he obviously loved it here. We see his uncle and his dad talking about how much he loved his time there and that there's no way he leaves the Yankees. Scott Boras even came out, and I never see this from Scott Boras, and this is something that was very interesting to me. Talked about how much Juan Soto loved his time there and how big of a player the Yankees are going to be for Juan Soto this all season. Scott Boras usually never mentions any sort of feelings his clients or players have towards any team that they might be leaning towards or interested in and how they feel because it's a bad business move. You don't want to give up the leverage. But seeing Scott Boras say that was definitely interesting to me because I never see it happen. That's why I don't know whether or not to believe the $660 million offer. Obviously, Steve Cohen is the richest owner in all of baseball. We've seen him throw money around like crazy when he got Verlander and Scherzer, and when he signed Lindor to that extension. Uh, uh, it's definitely tough not to believe it because of how Steve Cohen has handled his money in the past. But I also know how the baseball offseason is. There are constantly little tidbits of information leaked out by agents to make sure that teams get desperate and they overpay for their players. To me, everything is pointing towards the same pattern. We're seeing bits of information. A few days ago, there was an article published saying that Juan Soto was down to the Mets and the Red Sox. Juan Soto hasn't even had his meeting with the Yankees yet. So I don't know how you would say he's down to those two teams when he hasn't even had his meeting with the team he just came from, and his agent had openly said that he loved and enjoyed his time there. And we see his family members coming out and talking about how they don't see a world where he goes to another team. This is just another case of the anti-Yankee bias in the media where we see all of this information come out against the Yankees. I remember back in 2019 when the Yankees signed Garrett Cole, or yeah, I think it was the winter of 2019 they signed Garrett Cole. Might have been 2020, but everyone was talking about how he was going to go to the Angels. It was his hometown team, or it was his where he was from in Southern California, and the Yankees had no chance because they didn't want to go over a certain amount. I'm seeing the same things this all season with Juan Soto. The Yankees aren't going to go over $50 million a year. They don't have to go over $50 million a year if they don't want to. They could easily give him a 15-year, 700 million dollar contract, which would be about $40 million a year. Or they could go exactly 50 million. They could go 15,750. These are all options for the Yankees to keep them under that amount. The fact that we're hearing the Yankees aren't going to go over a certain amount to me is just the both sides trying to play their leverage. We're hearing things from the Boris camp where they're leaking information about Juan Soto leaning towards the Mets and the Red Sox because obviously those are the Yankees' two biggest rivals, their crosstown rival, and then their rival for almost a century in the Red Sox. The Yankees would never want to see that happen, obviously. So they believe that's the best information to put out there so that it leverages them a little bit and makes the Yankees desperate. It's very interesting to me to see tonight because Jeff Passan has said that he does not believe that the Juan Soto sweepstakes goes into December. Obviously, today's November 18th. We still have 2 weeks left in November, but it's interesting to me to see maybe the Yankees can iron out a deal. This Juan Soto meeting has been the biggest topic since the Yankees got taken down in the World Series by the Dodgers, obviously. Juan Soto is priority number one. And until that sweepstakes is decided, until we know where Juan Soto is going to be in 2025, nothing is going to matter to the Yankees. And Hal Steinbrenner has come out saying that he is willing to pay whatever it takes to get Juan Soto. We never see that from Hal. I think the only times Hal gets involved, he gets the player. I saw it with Garrett Cole when he met with Garrett Cole. I saw it when he met with Aaron Judge, when Aaron Judge resigned. And now I'm seeing it with Juan Soto. When the Yankees want their guy, they get their guy. And Juan Soto seems to be their guy. He's a young guy, too. When people talk about the Yankees don't have a young nucleus right now, first of all, that's an abysmal take because they have Caleb Durbin coming up at second base. He's one of the best infield prospects in all of baseball, let alone in the Yankees farm system. They have Anthony Volpe, who is still 23 years old. They have Austin Wells, who is a finalist for Rookie of the Year. Luis Heel, who is a finalist for Rookie of the Year. But if I were to take that stance and you re-sign Juan Soto is 27 years old, and he is another young guy to build around. He's already won a World Series, so he could be a veteran presence as well. But he's also a youth player to invigorate the team. I saw it last year when they made the World Series, or this season. It's just disappointing to me to see all of this anti-Yankee bias after they just made the World Series, because obviously to Yankees fans, we can't just take making the World Series as a success. We would have to win the World Series. I said it myself. But it's disappointing to see the rest of the media bash the Yankees and make it seem like they have no chance to get anyone, and this is a dire situation, and it's all gloom and doom. But I think the only thing that is going to settle this is wherever Juan Soto signs. And that's it. That's going to be the end of it. Moving on from Juan Soto a little bit. First base to me is the biggest issue outside of Juan Soto. They obviously are not bringing back Anthony Rizzo. They declined his option. And there are quite a few elite first basemen on the market. Christian Walker from Arizona, Pete Alonso from the Mets, Paul Goldschmidt from the Cardinals, and Carlos Santana. Played for multiple teams. I could see the Yankees going out and get any one of these players. I think the most likely scenario is Carlos Santana, and a lot of fans are going to get upset with that move, but Carlos Santana might not be the flashiest player, but he gets on base. He constantly has an on base percentage close to 400. He's a guy that you could stick in the middle of the lineup and be pretty confident in. He hits home runs. He's not your flashy player. He's not your star player. He's not Pete Alonso. He's not a name like Paul Goldschmidt, even though I think Paul Goldschmidt is a worse first baseman than Carlos Santana. And he's not Christian Walker. Obviously, to me, I think Christian Walker is the number one. I think that Pete Alonso is going to end up getting paid more than Christian Walker, but I think Christian Walker is the best first baseman on the market. He's a guy where he's went under the radar for years, and now that we're just now starting to realize how good he is. He's got great defensive numbers, and he hits 30 home runs every year like it's clockwork. He is the most consistent first baseman on the market, and to me, he's the best solution for the Yankees at first base. But I think a close second is Carlos Santana, and I think that Yankees fans need to take a step back if they were to sign him and realize, okay, this guy's consistent, he's valuable, he has great defense, he's going to be on the field every day, he rarely gets injured, and he's been in the league for years. He made it to the World Series with the Guardians or the then Indians back in 2016. He's got experience. He's going to be great at first base, and we have a lot of first basemen in the pipeline that could possibly come up. I was hoping Munetake Murakami would be posted by this year, but it doesn't seem like he's going to. He's known as the Japanese Babe Ruth. He has the most home run crowns in the MPB history, and he has the most. I think he might have the most home runs in a career for an MPB player already, too. But it doesn't seem like he's going to get posted this year, possibly next year. But talking about players getting posted, Roki Sasaki is very heavily favored to go to the Dodgers. I just want to make my quick stance as to why I don't think that's going to be the case. I read an article earlier. I want to say it was from the Post about how Roki Sasaki did not want to go to the Dodgers because he would be the third best Japanese player on his team. He would have both Yamamoto and Otani above him. And obviously, marketing is such a big thing when you come over from Japan to the United States. You want that big market share. If you were to come to New York, if you were to come to the Bronx, you would have that big chunk of the market. And apparently that's a huge issue with his camp is they want him to be very marketable as the Japanese star on a team. And that's basically my stance there is I don't think Roki Sasaki is going to go to the Dodgers. I don't necessarily think he's going to the Yankees either. But I do think we'll end up seeing him with a team where he's going to be the star player on the team. He's going to be the star pitcher. He's definitely going to be the number one Japanese player on the team. I could definitely see a team like the San Francisco Giants going after him. Um, Maybe even the San Diego Padres have been heavily rumored with Roki Sasaki. But those are all guys I definitely see teams I definitely see him going to over the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Yankees picked up their option with Aaron Boone for him to be the manager for this year. Obviously, a lot of Yankees fans disappointed as they should be. He has done nothing to earn that option being picked up. But I can't think too much about that because this is Brian Cashman's guy. Brian Cashman never had his guy. Um, Girardi was the closest thing he had to his guy, but I don't even think Girardi fit that mold because that was a George hire and that wasn't a Cashman hire. And Joe Torre was obviously also a George Steinbrenner hire. And now he finally has his manager. I don't think he's going to let him go. I think that Boone's going to be the manager as long as Brian Cashman is there, and we can't overthink that. One thing I do like is he is really hyping up the youth and leaning into the youth movement, notably Caleb Durbin at second and Dominguez in left. But in order for me to not care who's at manager and for me to not mind the fact that Aaron Boone is manager, we need to field a team that is almost too good for Aaron Boone to make the mistakes he did this year. We need to field a team that has such a good bullpen that Nestor isn't coming in the 10th inning. We need to field a team that is so good that we don't see DJ LeMahieu at first base for half the season. And we need to field a team where we don't see all these aging veterans anywhere in the roster, and they took a step forward by not picking up Anthony Rizzo's option, and I definitely need to see them lean into the youth movement. Definitely positive to see Aaron Boone leaning into that, and I hope that's what they're gonna go with going forward. Um, Other news coming back out. The Yankees a few weeks back had a weird situation with Garrett Cole where he opted out to opt back in. That was obviously very weird because the Yankees refused to pick up the last year on Cole's contract that would opt him back in or force him to opt back in. And Garrett Cole took it upon himself to opt back into the original deal. I didn't even think that was possible. I'm going to be honest here. Um, I thought that once you opted out, and that was it. But he signed the original contract, and that was that. To me, it shows that Garrett Cole wants to be a Yankee. Um, It's definitely disappointing to me to see from Brian Cashman not wanting to add 1 year. It was kinda silly after this guy's been exactly what you asked from him, and that's pretty much it with the Garrett Cole stuff, but definitely a weird situation there. 2 Yankees are in the finalists for MVP and Rookie of the Year. The MVP finalists are Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, and the Rookie of the Year candidates are Luis Heel and Austin. Obviously, all very deserving of this honor. 4 of the 2 of the best players in the game and 2 of the best rising stars in the game getting the honor of being Rookie of the Year finalists. The biggest piece of news coming around the Yankees was not acquiring a player, but acquiring a new radio voice, Dave Sims. Dave Sims is from the New York area. I'm very excited to see what he brings to the booth. He's so energetic. Everyone's pointing back to the call he had a few years back when the Mariners had to win their last game of the season, or it might have been the game before their last game, in order to keep their playoff hopes alive. And Mitch Haniger walked it off and said, and he was so energetic there, and I love this hire. A lot of people are upset they didn't go in house to a guy like Ricky Ricardo, but I think the Yankees and WFAN love Ricky Ricardo so much as the Spanish broadcaster, as the Spanish host, that they didn't want to vacate that spot there. And it's to me, the Dave Sims hiring was the best choice. It had been rumored for the past few months since John Sterling retired, and now they've finally made it official. I think fans that aren't familiar with his work and are upset with this hiring need to go back and look at his work with the Seattle Mariners as the TV host and understand this guy is one of the best broadcasters in the game, and the level of energy and reinvigoration he's going to bring to the booth. He was definitely the best choice out there, and I love this hiring. I know a lot of people around WFAN love this hiring, notably Keith McPherson, a friend of mine who I've been in contact with, and he's very close with Dave Sims. I'm hoping that Keith gets a few fill-ins there as the color commentator. A little bit more news on Keith later on in the show before I'm gonna do another Twitter segment because I really like doing it. Um, so I got a few tweets here. Sportsnut on Twitter brought up the fact that Spencer Jones could be the solution at first base. That was obviously a huge thing that everyone was talking about. The fact that Spencer Jones is very tall. He's built like a first baseman. But the fact that I haven't seen them work him out there yet, I think that Aaron Judge is really more of a possibility at first base than Spencer Jones. I don't think enough people are talking about the fact that Aaron Judge could be moved over to first base because he is aging. We've seen him get injured in the past fairly often, and to move him to first base would get rid of some of those injury worries. And I definitely think that Aaron Judge is more of a possibility at first base than Spencer Jones. Another tweet from Sportsnut here. How confident are we of Soto re-signing with the Yankees? I'd say I'm more confident in him re-signing with the Yankees than with any other team. But that being said, no one knows until the deal is signed. So I would give it like a 60% chance Soto resigns. Another tweet. Let's say the Yankees get Soto. Who else do we sign that is realistic and makes the team a little better for the Yankees to go all the way next season? So there's a response to this that I think is actually the perfect offseason plan for the Yankees. Christian Walker, Tanner Scott, Tim Hill, and trade one piece of our starters for a bullpen piece, maybe Devin Williams from the Brewers, and pray that Roki Sasaki doesn't want to be a Dodger and comes to the Yankees. I touched on Roki Sasaki already. Don't think he's going to the Dodgers. I don't think it's anything to worry about for the Yankees here. Um, but obviously, I think we need to beef up that bullpen a little bit. We're losing Clay Holmes. And I think that signing Tanner Scott would be the perfect replacement there. They obviously got Luke Weaver back. I think he's going to be the closer. He's proven he could be the closer. He's proven he had the mentality to be the closer on the biggest stage in the World Series. And to have a guy like Tanner Scott backing him up and maybe even a Devin Williams backing him up would be amazing. So, Mr. Wonderful, meaning Juan Soto, put out a poll. Do we think we see Spencer Jones in the majors this season? It was 69% no to 31% yes. I would definitely lean towards no this year too. Um, I think that this year is Jason Dominguez this year, and I think if I'm putting myself in the Yankees front office and what they think and what I've seen them think and the way that they go about things, they want that extra pick for Rookie of the Year. And so obviously they want Jason Dominguez winning Rookie of the Year this year, and I think they would want Spencer Jones winning Rookie of the Year in 2026. So if we do see Spencer Jones, I don't think it's going to be until very late in the season where he won't qualify for Rookie of the Year. Mm. Joey in South Florida said, I see nobody is mentioning that Jason Dominguez might be as good or better than Juan Soto. That's just a silly take to me. I mean, we've seen a very small sample size of Jason Dominguez. Let's not jump ahead of ourselves here. Let's not jump the gun. Let's think about it this way. We've seen very little from Jason Dominguez. Obviously, his ceiling has been projected to be very high, maybe that of Juan Soto, but Juan Soto is Juan Soto. There's only one of him. We can't think that Jason Dominguez, if we were to lose Juan Soto, is going to come up and produce even close to what Juan Soto has. If he produces 50% of Juan Soto's numbers, I would be happy. Matt Shove said, "Y'all want Bregman?" No. I saw Alex Bregman is looking for a contract very similar to what Manny Machado got, which was 11 years, 350 million. And he is worth nowhere near what Manny Machado is worth. So if that's what they're truly thinking, I would go nowhere near Alex Bregman. Last tweet here, probably the most interesting one. Eric Hubbs said, "I don't know if anything happens, but the vibe I get from the tea leaves is that the Yankees are shopping Dominguez for a big name." And then someone had responded to that, "Is that a random thought or did I miss something?" And Hubs responded back, "Not a random thought, just something I've been hearing." It definitely does match up with the fact that Aaron Boone is hyping up Jason Dominguez as this otherworldly talent, as someone that's gonna be the answer in the outfield and gonna be this amazing star level player. I think it's him trying to advertise him as someone that would be enticing towards other front offices. I've seen them do it in the past. Um, and definitely something I could see. Definitely interesting for Eric Hubs to be saying that too, that he's been hearing it around because it does match up with what Boone's been saying and what's happened in the past. So that's all I have for this week. On next week's show, I am going to have a guest starting at 1 o'clock for the last half hour of my show, being that of Keith McPherson, the host, the nighttime host for WFAN. He's going to be on via call, and I'm very excited for that. He's a friend of mine, very cool dude, one of the best up and comers. Um, but yeah, definitely a great week for New York sports. Can't wait to talk with you guys next week.